In this video, we continue talking about objects' behavior as part of the analysis model of the business requirements, specifically sequence diagram. Where we left off in our previous presentation here, slide number 5, sequence diagram example. In UML, sequence diagrams belong to the category of interaction diagrams, among others, which are also state diagrams and activity diagrams. The sequence diagrams are pretty common, showing the interaction between multiple objects in a single use case. State diagrams are also very effective diagrams, and usually they are very readable and very precise, and are good at describing behavior of one object across multiple use cases. And finally, activity diagrams really also allow us to show multiple objects participating in multiple use cases. So typical sequence diagram captures the behavior of single scenario of a use case. So sequence diagram shows possible implementation of one scenario. Remember that there could be alternative scenarios part of the use case, so then you'd normally have multiple sequence diagrams associated with a single use case. So let's take a look at this Alex Moffat's sequence diagramming tool that we used previously to explore all these elements of sequence diagrams: participants, lifelines, messages, activation bars, return arrows, and other parts of the notation which is available inside this tool. And I created an empty file to just keep track of our examples here. So let's now take a look at how would we show a call into a method main where Java program begins, or a function main where a C or C++ program begins. So to simply display the lifeline of a main function or main method in Java, we can just type main and use a semicolon right here. You can see that the result of doing something like this instantly creates the view of the main method right here and displays the lifeline for this specific part of our diagram. So to make it a little bit more visible, I'll just duplicate in a larger font all the text that I'm typing in this script inside the sequence tool. So when we only use the semicolon like this, it only creates a lifeline for our main operation. But we also need to show what happens inside main. So we change the code to use the brackets like this. Okay, so we can add brackets. And I'll just copy what I have into my script, and as you can see, it really didn't change much in the diagram. But now if we want to show that main creates an object, such as an object of a factory visitor shopper or something else, we can write it inside main like this. What I don't like about this is that we have a return line displaying void. Okay, so we're showing here call into new, and then there is a void return. So obviously this is the name of the class, and this is the name of some method. We'll talk a little bit about this new later on. But notice that on the return line, when we come back from the activation bar right here of this call, it displays void. So I think we better remove this void only to show a blank return line like this. Okay, so with this type of syntax, we use an arrow, we use double quotes, we continue using the semicolon, and altogether, if you take a look at the results of this change, you see how void has just disappeared. So we have a pretty clean call into new, and then the return shown as just blank return line. So this arrow syntax allows us to use quoted string and type anything you want, but I prefer to show blank in most cases. So my string is having only one space in it, right? So there is a space. So now we can repeat this technique to also show the creation of simulation scenario object as an example. So here we just insert new line and we do something very similar. So we can just duplicate this code in the script like this. And you see that instantly the simulation scenario object also appears as one of the participants in this diagram, and we similarly we display this call into new. It is also possible to include call parameters in our sequence diagram. For example, we can decide that we get an object reference such as factory from the call into factory constructor. So instead of using this blank, I replace it with factory. So instantly this factory, if I add this to our script right here, you see that the factory object in the return line indicates the return of the factory object. And now we can show factory as a parameter to the simulation scenario constructor. Okay, so here we can expand this like using the method call notation like this, and I'll just copy and paste this line into my script. Okay, like this, and you see that this now new appears to be with the parameter using the parentheses, and so this constructor of simulation scenario is now using this method notation after making this change. So our tool understands that method calls may include a list of parameters, which is pretty natural, and it's part of what is available in sequence diagram. In real programming languages, we use names of classes as constructor names. Okay, so to expand this, possibly we can use this shopper. So instead of new, we can just use the name of the class to be precise in terms of the programming language notation for constructor. And similarly, simulation scenario also can be done like this. Okay, so if we make this change in our script, I'll just simply replace these two lines with the new version. You can see that just like in real programming languages, we now use names of classes as constructor names. So if we want to switch to this programming language like notation, we can replace it directly in our script. And this is the way we actually did this in our sequence demo when we talked about abstract factories for various kinds of visitors in the system. Okay, so if you like this better is fine. In my sequence diagrams, I normally use new when showing the constructors. Okay, so I'm switching back to using new like this, and so I'm just switching back to the way it was before. Okay, so now we're using new instead of names of classes for our constructors when we display calls into constructors of our objects. So I prefer this notation because the names of classes are still visible at the top, and new is the first call into this object lifeline anyways, because constructor creates the object in the first place. So I prefer new notation, just like I have it here right now. So in most cases, sequence diagrams are self-explanatory. The bottom line is that the good diagram should be readable to all intended audiences. And based on that, you can include more details or less details in your diagrams, or possibly simplify the entire structure of diagram to show maybe only parts of what's really happening in real application during runtime.